Welcome to From Potential to Powerhouse, Success Secrets from Female Leaders, where female trailblazers share their journeys and the aha moments that made all the difference. With your host, serial entrepreneur and trailblazer herself, Tracy Holland.
Hi, everyone. It's Tracy Holland, your host on Potential to Powerhouse. We are in season 2 of Potential to Powerhouse, talking to someone who is so inspired, Fawn Weaver, who is the founder of Uncle Nearest Whiskey. She's an entrepreneur. She's the CEO. She's also a TED speaker, best-selling author. You may be familiar with Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey. She is running and founded the fastest growing American whiskey brand and the first African-American founded spirit of all time. She's going to share with us her big moments in her life, like her decision to leave home and her family at the age of 15 and lived at the Covenant House, a transition home for youth, before she decided to become an entrepreneur and start her own business. I had the privilege of flying to Shelbyville, sitting with Fawn to sit down and talk about her entrepreneurial journey, but also her passion for people, how she loves to be a business owner and a CEO, and what is so embracing about her, which is her personality and who she is. So I have to say how excited I am to be here in Shelbyville, Tennessee, sitting on your couch of the most beautiful building, distillery, home, because your staff feels like family.
They are.
So it's such a tribute to you, Fawn, and what you've built. I'd love to dive into, let me first, before I start, one of the first thing I noticed when I went into your gift shop is your t-shirt that says love.
Yeah.
And hearing your story, talking to you for the first time when you and I spoke on the phone, the number one feeling that I had from you is your connection to love.
Yeah.
And who you are as a human. Mm-hmm. And I was so touched the first time I spoke to you about not only your personal story and the story of how you came to want to share the story of Uncle Nearest and his relationship to Jack Daniels, and really your vision about the fact that Uncle Nearest and Jack Daniels shared a love.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A true friendship. Mm-hmm. And so being in your gift shop and walking around and seeing that t-shirt that said love, I just want to acknowledge that that's how you're impacting the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm really honored to be here. I'm so excited to share your story. There are so many female entrepreneurs who are about to dive into this with you and hear how you founded the fastest growing American distillery in the United States right now. I think you said you doubled, or you have doubled your growth over the last 11 quarters. Is that right?
Yeah, triple digit gains, over 100% year over year for 11 quarters in a row.
And not only the fastest growing distillery, but the distillery in the United States that's run by an African American woman.
Yeah.
Founder.
Yeah. Well, we take every record related. If you put color or gender in it and it's not a white male, we take every record, every single one, from the beginning of time until now.
Because up until you started this,
didn't exist.
It didn't exist. 100% of the distilled brands in the United States of whiskey and bourbon were owned by white men.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a record break.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's America's native spirit, but somehow African Americans just did not remain a part of it. They were a part of it from the very beginning, and obviously enslaved. And after that time, I don't know if it's a lot of work. The distilling business, we make it look beautiful and glamorous on these tours, but the behind the scenes to actually make whiskey, it's not glamorous at all. It's not pretty at all. And so I think just as African Americans in general, going from being picking cotton, right? And tobacco and distilling. These were the jobs that the masters didn't want to have. And so I think that once we had our choice, then those jobs were the ones we left behind. So you'd hard pressed to find African Americans in cotton, tobacco, or in American whiskey.
Right. And so one of the things that strikes me about you, not only are you someone who leads with your heart, but you have incredible intuition, and I would say you're tenacious as hell. Would you agree?
Slightly. Slightly.
I would love to hindsight a little bit about your childhood, because I think your childhood plays such an important role, I think.
Yeah.
I'm looking in from the outside, so correct me, but starting off with your dad, who in many ways was a creative, right? And a musician and a songwriter. And you were born in where were you in the birth order?
I'm number 3.
Oldest or youngest?
I am in the middle, so I have 2 elder siblings, sisters. So we didn't grow up with our brother. Our brother grew up with his mother in Detroit. So I don't really count him, not because he's not my half brother and he's amazing, but I didn't know him until I was an adult, really, truly. And so I am otherwise in the middle. 2 older sisters, 2 younger sisters.
Okay. Okay. So all girls.
All girls.
Okay.
Smack dab. Yeah.
So, and you talk about a little bit about kind of questioning the status quo from birth.
Questioning everything.
Right. So your favorite word?
No.
Okay.
It's still my favorite word. Someone got me a thermos that says, first of all, no. Right. And secondly, no. And every person who sees me walk around with this thermos thinks it's the funniest thing, because it's my personality. Here's my thing. I start with no and we work our way to yes. Okay. Because I think that a lot of, especially women, one of the things we have the hardest time doing is saying no. But truly, so much of my success has been because I've embraced that one word with absolute abandon. I do not concern myself where everything falls once I say no.
Interesting.
I just say no.
Yeah. So I agree. I could use more practice with that myself, because I do think that getting to the best side of opportunities can be knowing what to say no to. Yeah. And opens doors. So in terms of growing up in your household, how did that serve you or not?
Well, here's the thing, is it served me well, because I truly believe that everything that happens in our lives, if we embrace it this way, everything that happens in our lives forms who we become. It forms our strength. And so I look at it as a very positive thing. My parents do too now, looking back at it. But at that time, it drove them absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, because their parenting style was authoritarian, which is very, very natural for African Americans right on the other side of slavery. That is, we were told what to do, so we tell those who are dependent on us what to do. There is not sort of this, you question me. It is, you do what I say because I said it. I was in the airport a couple of days ago and I saw this black guy and he had on this shirt and he said, because I said so and I'm the dad. And it just, but that is the style of parenting, is authoritarian, right? Right. Well, you have this child who instinctively that doesn't work for. And so as early as I was able to question, I did. I came out of my mother's womb at 9 pounds, 7 ounces. So I was a little chunk. And I apparently, this is according to her, I drank her breast milk for 3 months. And then as soon as I was like big enough to sustain on my own, I refused it and just sucked my thumb for the next 3 months. Wow. I didn't want to be bothered with milk. So that was the first indicator.
She's like, now
that
what?
I don't want to be attached. Yeah. I am going to kind of do this my way. I want to have the freedom to decide what I wanted. And so that was just the way that I was wired. I think that a lot of parents now are leaning into, okay, my child is wired this way. How do I embrace this? I have a girlfriend whose daughter is just like I was as a kid, and I have to coach her quite a bit and go, don't worry, she's the kid that's going to be paying for your living when you're too old to take care of yourself. she's the one.
Right.
And so there is just embracing that type of personality. But my parents didn't know how. There weren't books on this, right? Sure. But Myers-Briggs, which I'm a big fan of personality tests, I fall under INTJ. Okay. And I'll go in between INTJ and INFJ, depending on the year. But either way, neither one of them is more than 2% of the population. One is less than 1%, one is less than 2%. And so most people coming across me in a boardroom haven't come across my style before. So it's really confusing because I lead with love. I lead with honor, but I say no.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's fascinating is I'm an ENTJ.
Ah, yeah. Right, but that's where your yes it comes from.
That's right.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I could use some practice.
Yeah.
I'm going to follow your lead. So when you were 14, 15, what happened for you?
I left home when I was 15. So my parents had a surprise, which my mother was not expecting to get pregnant at. She was 40, maybe 40 years old, and it just came out of nowhere. Well, wow. They really wanted to be able to try to raise the new child, the baby that was coming, in a better manner than the prior children because they had learned so much. I mean, my little sister is 15 years younger than I am. She's about to turn 30 and I'm 45. So wow, they kind of wanted an opportunity for a redo. Right. Which they shared with me. And they wanted me to sort of fall in line in terms of how they were going to be parenting this particular child. So it wasn't an ultimatum as much as it was we need you to do this. And that just didn't work for me.
So what happened? Was there a day where you said, I'm leaving?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a fight. It wasn't it was just, this situation won't work for me. Right. And I left.
Were you scared?
No, it's very interesting. I knew it was time. Yeah. And I didn't have any fear about it.
And did you decide at that point, were you thinking, I'm going to go to college, or were you thinking, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, or did you not really have that figured out at that point?
I didn't think about it. I thought I need to be in an environment where I can create my own world. Right. And where the rules make sense to me. Right. Right. And these didn't. It was a very strict religious upbringing. Yeah. And it just did not make sense to me. And I had to be able to ask the question, well, why do you believe this? And if your answer was, because I am mom and I am dad and you should believe this because this is what we believe, that didn't work.
So I don't think you realize how much you and I have in common. At 14, I went to my parents and asked them for $40 so I could take my GED.
Get out of here.
So that I could go to cosmetology school so I could move out and be a hairstylist.
Let me tell you what's funny about that story is that my mother said to me, my aunt was, I think she made like $75 an hour as a paralegal, right? And so, $75 an hour as a paralegal. And my mother was trying to get me to do typing and all the rest of this stuff. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And she said, your aunt makes $75 an hour. And I said, how much did you pay the last time you went to go get your hair done? And, she's like, $75. I was like, I will be a hairdresser. And so that ended. So I was the only daughter that didn't have to take typing. Right. And so that was,
I'm exactly that way. Yeah. And honestly, I would have left, except that they sent me to reform school the next weekend, and I disappeared for 2 years, literally, into a school.
Oh my!
Where you don't leave. You talk about follow the rules.
Oh,
so
okay.
Hard labor, very, very strict. Yeah. Kind of lockdown school,
oh my.
And so had I had the ability to pack and leave, I would have. But it was exactly the same thing. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't having sex. I wasn't being a bad kid.
Same here. I've never done a drug in my entire life. I've never tried a cigarette. I'm like the most straight-laced human being you ever want to meet. Right. I just needed to get out of the house.
That's how I was.
Yeah.
And so I really relate to that. So how was that transition for you at that point? You were still living in LA?
I did. I moved to Watts. I moved to the projects, Jordan Downs. And it was, I think for were people dying all around me.
Sure.
But for whatever reason, I just didn't have any kind of fear. This is one thing that was great about my upbringing, is that my parents spoke a lot. They were in ministry. They spoke a lot about the afterlife. They spoke a lot about heaven. I had a very strong belief in that. And because of that, I didn't have a fear of dying, right? And so I think a part of the way that I've operated throughout life is if you don't have a fear of dying, then you don't have a fear of fill in the blank.
Interesting.
Right? And so I would walk around those projects like I owned the place.
Right.
No fear.
And did you start working right away? Did you finish school? Where did you?
Yeah, I did. I didn't start working right away. I just continued going to school with the girls. So that's how I found them, as we were in high school together. So I continued going to school with those girls that were there, and you know, in the projects, they just didn't have rules. And so that worked for me.
Sure.
And I continued to do that. And until it was an interesting situation happened in the projects. We were all at this sort of concert that was going on, you know, local kids or whatever. And they had a DJ, and it was hip hop artists and all the rest of this stuff. And in the middle of the concert, I'm standing kind of in the middle of the crowd, just having fun like everyone else. And the guy says, cut the music, and they cut the music. And he looks me dead in the eyes, and he said, we have a half-breed in the house. Now, I didn't even know what a half-breed was. Now, my grandmother is German, blonde hair, blue eyes, which is where the streaks and the light eyes come from. But I really didn't know what that even was, or at least I didn't look at myself that way. But that was the first time I felt out of place there.
Wow.
And it wasn't long after that I decided to leave. It just didn't work. But I still didn't go home. I went to homeless shelters.
Wow.
And I lived in 3 different homeless shelters. The last one right after I turned 18 years old and then it was from there that I actually launched out on my own and began my career and my life and all the rest of that. But that period between 15 and 18 was pretty interesting.
Were you at that point as a female thinking the world is my oyster? Or were you thinking this is going to be I'm going to have to dig in? Like
I never saw myself as a female.
You didn't?
Ever. To this day.
Right.
Like I've broken all these records because or made history as this and that and this and that because I am a woman.
Yeah.
But I've never looked at myself walking into a room as the female walking in, the woman walking in.
Right.
Never.
I agree.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So, and do you think, is that because of the way you had an interface with your dad? I mean, did he always make you feel like, because I think back and I try to reference what was the one thing, and I just remember my dad always saying, like, you can be and do anything you want. But that's because he had 4 girls. So we didn't have boys.
Right.
Right? And I was supposed to be the boy. So at some point, I think he just was like, throw in the towel. I can, you know, you can be whatever you want. Do you attribute it to something that just gave you that confidence at that age?
No, I don't recall there ever being you can do whatever you want. The only thing that I remember very clearly about my dad was, one, he always led and lived his life from a place of grace rather than race. And having been a kid who grew up in Texas and picking cotton in the fields, that was a big deal. That he was always able to see the world and people for who they were, and race was never a part of his lens. Never. And the other thing is that he was always very clear that excellence is not something to aspire toward. That is the standard.
Got it.
That is not the goal.
Right.
That is the standard.
Interesting.
And so I think that that's something that has absolutely marked every aspect of my life. Wow. Is that excellence is not the goal.
Right.
That's the baseline.
Right.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So in terms of the next phase of your life, as you were transitioning out of the homeless shelter, was there an impetus like a job or an opportunity that got you?
So what was really cool, and I just did an interview recently and mentioned this, and then they reached into me, which was very cool. But Covenant House in Hollywood, they had a really amazing program, and apparently I just found out my caseworker is still there, which is pretty cool. So I'm sure I'll connect with her soon. But their program is that you go there, but every single day you go out and you look for work. And so everyone that's at Covenant House is 18 years or older, and that's just the process. Then you come back at the end of the day and just sort of around a campfire, if you will, and then everybody talks about their day and their challenges and their struggles and all the rest of that stuff. And I will never forget the first day I go out and we come back, we do this whole thing, and everyone's talking about how hard it was to get a job and all the rest of that. And I sat there quiet as I don't know what, because I went out, and by the time I got back, I think I had 3 job offers.
Wow.
It's every place I went to interview, I had a job offer coming back. And so it was immediately I began working.
Yep.
And the way that Covenant House works, which is really brilliant, is they keep your money. You basically turn your checks over to them, and they keep it in an escrow account for you. And then once you reach, I think it was like $5,000 or something like that, once you reach that amount that allows you to go get an apartment, they basically just cut the check to you, you go get an apartment, you live on your own.
Wow.
And so that's the transition, is I literally was there, I'd get up in the morning, I'd go to work, I'd come back at night, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, go to work, and just do it again until I had enough to get my own spot.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And you started off in PR.
I started off in PR. So I started off, what I was doing that I was making money. PR, I was an actual intern.
Yeah.
But what I was doing making money is restaurants, which to this day is one of my favorite jobs.
Me too.
Ever, is serving. I would be a food server in a heartbeat. And at one point I was an investor in a restaurant, and I loved to go and bus. And I was been a general manager at a hotel, and I would literally go and pick up after people, and people were like, that's not usually what the GM does. I was like, this GM does.
Yeah.
I love serving people.
Yeah, I did too. It was one of my favorite jobs.
Yeah, to this day.
Yeah.
I mean, I love what I do, and I've loved every job I've ever had, though, which is really interesting. Everything I've ever done, I've loved, and I really, really, really enjoyed that.
So in terms of PR, and in hindsight, I wonder, because just to fast forward, I see that you're opening this beautiful restaurant here at Uncle Nearest at the distillery. I mean, like everything ties in full circle. Isn't that kind of incredible to think about?
Every aspect of what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Some portion of what I have done. It's why people have to be very careful about despising where they begin.
It's true.
Every place where you are, there's something you're able to take from that.
Right.
So I can go through the list of every job I've ever had, from a server at Camacho's Cantina and BB King's Blues Club, because that's what I was doing at that time. I can go all the way back and say, this provided me this skill set that I'm using today. This provided me this skill set that I'm using today. I mean, every single thing I've ever done.
Isn't that incredible? And so when you were doing PR, one of the things I thought was really remarkable about how you approached it, and it's actually a perfect example of, I think, who you are as a person, is you're not sending out press releases per se on a daily basis to every magazine. You're like, how do I integrate the brand into an experience?
100%. It was what they now call product placement, right? Which was happening in movies and on TV, but it wasn't happening in real life because there weren't these influencers like there are now.
Right.
And so there weren't things that were being placed, but I looked at every bit of PR, as I do now, as fully experiential. Yeah. Everything that you touch, everything that you see needs to be a part of what you're doing.
Right.
And so for this brand, people are like, how have you been doing PR? Like, had all these stories nonstop for more than 4 years. Like, usually, especially with a brand, they'll talk about it right when it comes out. You might get a good article once a year, and then that's basically it. I think I joke with the CBS This Morning folks, because I'm like, we've done a full 6-minute segment every single year since this brand came out.
Isn't that incredible?
It's incredible. But the key is always having something to talk about that is interesting. So from a PR standpoint, I never send out a press release and say, hey, here's my product. I want you to talk about my product. That's never been my approach. My approach is you are in the media, right? Yep. So you have a magazine, or you have a television show, or you have a radio show. What is it that your viewers or your audience wants to hear about. What do they want to read about? What is interesting to them? And then I build out the stories based on what is interesting to them, because they have a job, right? To get more viewers, to get more listeners, to get more. So if I can help them, this kind of goes back to I love to serve. If I can be of service to them in serving the people who they are speaking to or writing to, then I'm able to continue to tell the story in interesting ways that matter.
Yeah. And one of the things you mentioned that you learned, which I learned in my first business, was your overhead you exceeded your overhead from your income.
Holy cow.
And so you're like, okay, I see the writing on the wall.
Yeah, it was, I mean, that transition was actually it was easy, because someone had reached into me for PR and doing special events, and I was able to sort of pivot from one to the other pretty seamlessly. But no, that first company, I'm young, I'm 18 years old, I open a business, I hire a bunch of people, and don't consider the fact that, well, hello, you have to actually pay these people, and yes, you're making enough for yourself and maybe a person or two people, but you're not making enough for an entire office full of people. So that was just a learning lesson, basic balancing of the, the
But it's
P&L.
such an important one.
It's a really important one that I'm grateful that I learned at 18, 19.
Me too.
Versus learning it now.
Me too. And so how old were you and at what point during this period did you meet your now husband?
I was 26. No, 25.
When you
met him? Yes, I was 25 when I married him. I was 26 when I met him. 26 when I married him. But it was quick. I mean, we literally talked on the phone in April. His mother set us up. She literally, she met me, spent a little bit of time with me, and called her son and said, I just met your wife. And Lord knows, no only child wants to hear from his mother, I met your wife. So he was running, I was running, and she was like, oh, I got this. She didn't leave either one of us alone until we actually connected. So we talked for the first time in April, met on our first date, May 9th, 2003. He proposed on September 6th, 2003. We were married on December 27th, 2003. So we're about to celebrate 18 years of marriage.
And did you have a big wedding? Like, did your mom and dad come, your sisters? You did.
I mean, come on, my personality did.
Right.
Is that not expected?
I had to ask. I'm trying to imagine you hosting this.
No. So we eloped, and then for our 10 year, we did a real wedding, but we surprised all the guests. So every guest was there ready for a barbecue, and we come out in a tux and a full wedding gown, but that was our kind of wedding.
Oh my gosh,
that was our kind of wedding.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that really struck me in researching and hearing your story was this pivot moment in 2003. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't, but tell me which one you're referring to.
The one where Keith got sick and passed out.
Yeah. It was, that one was, I don't know if it was a pivot as much as it was just when that happened. And we weren't even, I think we had just gotten engaged.
Yeah.
But that moment was just one of those, oh, I don't want to ever lose this guy.
Right.
Ever.
Right.
Yeah.
And so because he, and it almost, it sounds like how your first book came about and all of that around the Happy Wives Club.
Yeah.
And recognizing this, I think as a mentor to a lot of women that you've been on how to go through 28 days to be in an argument-free marriage, right? But, and all of your advice is so practical and you could actually apply it to any relationship, to be honest,
which
not just your relationship with your husband or partner. But one of the things that I so understood was this moment in which you recognize how much you love this person.
Yeah.
And there's no guarantee of tomorrow.
There is no guarantee.
Right?
It's an interesting thing, and I don't think people really consider sort of the assumption, I call it arrogance. It's a bit of arrogance to believe that the person you're having a conversation with, that you're arguing with, you'll be able to come back and complete that argument or to make it right or to apologize. There are so many people who their biggest regret is the last conversation they had with a loved one was an argument. And so I refuse for that to be the case. I am as strong-willed as I am, as driven as I am. I don't have drama in my life. I mean, zero. It doesn't mean you don't have challenges, right? I mean, growing a business as I am, there's a lot of challenge, but there's a difference between challenge and drama. Right?
100%.
I'm not going to sit and argue with anybody, and especially my spouse.
Right.
And that is just, I don't believe in sweeping things under the rug, but I also believe that there is an ability to speak to those who you love with a level of respect that allows for you both to be up here versus you really have to get in the mud to argue. Right. And so when you kind of come out of the mud and you're just like, okay, we're going to talk to each other. We're going to work this out with the utmost respect. So my husband knows I may not like something that you just did, but I love and adore and respect you.
Right.
And there's a separation there. It's like the difference between a person who has lied and a liar, or a person who has had alcohol and an alcoholic. Like people try to bring those two things together and they don't have to be. So I could disagree with you and us not argue about it.
Right.
We can just have a conversation. And if the end result is we agree to disagree, that's okay too. He and I usually do find common ground in terms of, okay, I understand your point here. I understand your point here. And these are just two different perspectives. So I don't even know that we necessarily agree to disagree. We just respect that we're two individuals. And sometimes we're just going to have different viewpoints, and that's okay. I don't understand this whole group think. I don't need you to agree with me. I don't need you to think like me. But give me that same respect.
And did you, in that moment when he passed out, or you had that kind of medical scare, right, where all of a sudden the person you're in love with,
that was crazy,
just goes to the hospital after being fine, right? Like he ate a meal or something.
He had a meal and literally passed out in Beverly Hills in the bathroom at the restaurant. They had to rush him to and it was crazy because my restaurant that I was an investor in and that I raised all the money for and launched it and all the rest of that stuff. So the person who I was having dinner with, he knew I had a restaurant on the street, on 3rd Street. He just didn't know where. So he literally went door to door to every restaurant. Now, if you've ever been on 3rd Street in the Beverly Center area, it's a lot of restaurants. And so the poor guy literally just walked into each place. And so my business
Fawn Weaver,
exactly.
Fawn Weaver.
Does Fawn Weaver own this? Does Fawn Weaver own this? So my business partner, G. Garvin, I get a call on my phone and he says, Fawn, do you know a so-and-so? And I said, yes, Keith was just having dinner with him. He says, okay, your fiance's in the hospital. That's how this guy literally went down restaurant by restaurant until he found the right one. And so that's how I got the call. And after that, it was like, I don't know if that was what dictated how we've always spoken to each other with a great level of respect, but I have always been cognizant that I could wake up one morning and him be gone. And vice versa. And so we go throughout our day. It's very rare for us to hang up the phone without saying I love you first. We never leave each other's presence without a kiss and a hug and an I love you, because there is this realization that if this is the last time, if this is the last time I see you, do I make sure that how I set you off, I can replay that over and over and over again. And I know if anything happened to my husband today,
he knows. And he
knows that I love him more than anything and any person in this world.
It's amazing.
And vice versa. If anything were to happen to me, if I didn't wake up tomorrow morning, he knows without question he loved me better than anybody could have ever loved me in this lifetime.
Oh my gosh, Fawn. I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think one of the things that I admire so much about you is how much of an incredible business person you are and how articulate and just driven, right? Like when I first spoke to you on the phone the first time, I thought, wow, this woman really is in charge. Okay. I haven't even met her yet. Like, you're in charge. I love that. But gosh, to be able to have a partner in a relationship in which you both have found such a beautiful ecosystem of support and love, and that you have taken those learnings, and that's how you became a best-selling author.
Have you ever read, is it Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich,
right?
Course. I feel like most business people have, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things he says is he's gone and, he's interviewing Carnegie and he's interviewing everybody, Rockefeller and all the rest of these. And one of the things he says in that book is the #1 indicator of how a person will do in life, whether or not they will succeed, the #1 indicator was the partner they chose.
Wow.
#1. And so a lot of people don't understand how connected their success is to the partner they have chosen.
Yes.
They don't realize that.
It's true.
I realize it.
It's true.
I chose well.
And so did he.
I chose well. He chose really, really well. But the thing is that we're two people that are constantly fighting toward the same goal versus fighting against one another. And so we're so laser beam focused on where we're going and the future and the success that we're building. And I think people don't realize how much energy they expend at home arguing with their spouse.
Right. I loved your TED Talk. So for anyone listening to really understand your perspective on this, highly recommend watching your TED Talk.
Yes. Yes.
Because it is so well articulated. And frankly, for those of us who don't have a partner, and I'm okay to wait to find the right partner. There's no rush, right?
There is zero rush.
Yeah.
There's zero rush, because if you are striving toward success by yourself, you are far better off.
That's right.
Than if you're doing it with a partner that isn't either equally yoked or that isn't that really isn't rooting you on. My husband is my biggest cheerleader.
Yep.
But he's not just my biggest cheerleader. He rolls up his sleeves and gets to work when I need his help.
Right.
That's
so when you decided, when you went to him and said, hey, I have this idea, I want to write a book, and here's what I want to talk about. What was that? Was that a collaboration? The first one, the Happy Wives Club.
Here's the interesting thing. That actually came from the publisher. So I have always written. I've always had manuscripts on my computer, but it was never to publish.
I see.
I write because it's cathartic, and I write because the lessons that I learn, the lessons that God deposits into me.
Yep.
I don't want to have to go back to God about the same thing I already asked and he already answered.
Right.
And so I have always kept sort of those notes, but I wrote them in such a way that it very much so read like a manuscript.
And when you write, do you write or do you type?
Now I type.
Let's
see. Even then I type. I type from a very from a very young age. And so I would actually keep I had all these manuscripts of sorts on my computer, and what would happen is I talk to a girlfriend and they're struggling with something, and I go, oh, wait a minute, I already wrote about that, and I would just send them the manuscript.
Oh my god,
that was like sort of my normal way of that's just how I did it. And so my girlfriends were used to me saying, oh, I already wrote about this one, hold on, and sending them a chapter or something of that nature. Well, in this case, my little sister was getting married. Keith and I at that point had been married for 5 years, had an incredibly peaceful marriage, a really loving marriage, the same one we have now. And so I went to him and I said, babe, I want to set her up for success. And so let's sit down and figure out what are the top 10 things that we do to foster this peaceful marriage we have. And so we sat down to write our list. Well, the list ended up being 25 things that we subconsciously did. It wasn't anything that we said, hey, let's do this, this, and this. We just realized that there were these 25 things that we did in our marriage. And so then I decided I would write something for each one. And I'm like, but wait, if we add 3 more days, it could be like a 28-day type of manual, if you will, for the first 28 days of their marriage. And so we wrote this peaceful marriage. I had my sister, who's a designer, design this beautiful cover. Ironically, she's the one who designed the Happy Wives Club cover, but I had her design this beautiful cover, and we did it like a gift book. And every day was a different story for them to read related to that principle, and then places for them to write and that kind of thing.
Right.
And so we did this, and we made a second copy for my mother. Well, my mom displayed it at her house on her coffee table, so every couple who would come would go, we want that, right? So then I started literally printing it in spiral bound for all these couples who would ask her, can we have one of those? And so that's when I finally decided, okay, I will publish something, because so many people are asking me about this, and I'm tired of making copies and spiral bounding it for all these people who go to my parents' house and see this book and they want a copy of it. And so that is what I sent to actually my mother's agent, because she is an author. And I literally, she was. Okay. And for, oh my gosh, I think she probably has maybe 10 books.
Wow.
And so I sent that to her literary agent.
Wow.
And he reached into me, and I said, now here's the thing, I don't actually want to be an author.
Yeah.
But, and he's like, so do you have more? I said, I've got plenty of stuff. So anyhow, we submitted this particular manuscript. There was this bidding war among 3 different publishing houses. Wow. And the one with the top bid wanted to do a 2-book deal.
Wow.
And that one said, but we want your first book to be Happy Wives Club. That's how Happy Wives Club came to be.
Wow.
And when they told me sort of the concept of what they wanted it to be about, I told my agent, I said, well, I've always wanted to travel the world. I wanted to go to all 7 continents. And so what better way than to have a publisher cut a check.
Sure.
And I'm going to go around the world and interview couples happily married 25 years or more. And I'm going to deduce the common denominator. That was the goal. I figured if I talked to couples that were from different backgrounds, different race, different religion, different socioeconomic background, that there would be at least one commonality.
And what was it?
There were 12.
There were 12.
There were 12. They'll have to buy the book to know.
Yes.
But the number one thing was mutual respect.
Wow.
It's got to go both ways.
Yeah.
This whole idea that women want love and men want respect. No. Men want love and respect, and women want love and respect. Yeah. And all of the couples who I interviewed, they were referred to me by other people in their countries, in their communities that are like, and most of them were referred by their own kids, because I wanted to make sure that they were couples that inside their home
were really in love.
Yeah. This wasn't for show. At the time, there wasn't really social media, so it wasn't for the gram or for Facebook. But even still, you had a lot of people that outwardly people would think were in love, but when you really got under it. There was actually one couple who I interviewed that didn't make it into the book, because when I sat with them, I was like, this is for show. I could feel it. Like, and they were the one couple that actually wasn't referred to me. So that was, I had seen them. And then so that was my own fault. But
and was there ever flack or feedback that you got as a result of that book from women who weren't able to obtain that in their own relationship? Did you get support when you launched it from other women saying, wait a second, how does this work?
Yeah, you get a lot of people that say, how does it work? And I'm sure I had naysayers. I am brilliant with tuning out naysayers because I live the life I talk about.
Right.
I actually live it.
Right.
And so you can't convince me that something is impossible that I'm in the middle of living.
Right.
So it's very easy for me to completely ignore any kind of naysayers, and not just ignore them, not even remember they exist. Right. So I'm sure there were douters.
Yeah.
It
was funny because in your TED Talk, you're like, those of you who are laughing, read the book.
Yeah. No, it is because you say Happy Wives Club or you say Happy Wives and people immediately start thinking Stepford Wives, right? Which really weren't actually happy. They were just more robotic or whatever. Right. And so that's what the thought process is. But I am a genuinely strong woman. Like, there's no, if you talk to anybody who has ever done business with me, I am a really strong woman.
Right.
But my marriage is one of interdependence. I'm independent, he's independent, but we are interdependent in how we live our lives. Yeah.
I can't wait to meet Keith. I really
He's amazing.
feel like
he's here, by the way.
I can't wait to meet. I just
We'll walk over
so
and say hello.
beautiful to me. So were you on a book tour when you read in the newspaper about Jack Daniel's? Where were you?
I wasn't. Here's the crazy part. So I've done a lot of investing over my life, over my career. And there was this one particular investment, and it was, again, I don't believe in regret. It was a $2 million loss. That was one of the greatest investment lessons I've ever learned up until this point, which was you never invest in a brand or product, you invest in the founder. And I believed in the brand and the product. I was iffy on the founder. And that proved to be the undoing. Let me say this. Let me not say I was iffy on the founder. I believed the founder could change based on her company being in such a bad place when I came along to infuse with capital and all of the feedback that her employees had been giving her over the years of just how mean she was, right? And so my thought process was, this person is like 2 seconds from rock bottom. When that happens, they'll change.
Sure.
That's usually not the case.
Right.
But it's a lesson I lost $2 million learning.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I was literally toward the tail end of this situation with this investment and looking at this and going, either I'm going to keep just throwing money at this.
Yeah.
And this person has made it clear they're not going to change, or I'm going to pull out. And I wasn't sure. So I was just in a really frustrated moment. And on a whim, my husband was going on business to Singapore. And I was like, you already have the hotel? I'm going to hitch your ride. And so I literally booked a flight just to be there the whole time he was there and do nothing.
Right. Because you were tormented at this point, or frustrated,
I was
or
definitely
upset.
frustrated.
Right.
I was really frustrated.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where we've always been co-partners in everything. And so even though I'm the person who's in there really in the trenches, he was involved in every aspect of every, I mean, he's my partner in every aspect of my life. And so he was frustrated as well. The difference is I was dealing with it top of the morning every day till at night. And so, yeah, I need a bit of a break.
So you hop on the plane.
I hop on the plane and I go to Singapore, and the first morning we're there is when I read the article about Jack Daniel,
which is the photo. I remember you saying, like, I saw this photograph.
Yeah.
Okay, so
well, the first thing I saw wasn't, I mean, the photograph was there and it was pretty large. And in Singapore, it was on the cover of the New York Times International Edition. Here, I believe it was the cover of the food section, but there it was actually the front page.
Sure.
And you see this photo of Jack Daniel, and he, to his right, is an African-American man. And the headline was, Jack Daniel embraces a secret ingredient, help from a slave.
Wow.
And so I'm literally looking at this, and my eyes are wide as saucers. Now we're on the other side of the world. So Keith is sitting across from me thinking, oh my God, what happened in America? Thinking like something really, really happened. And I look up and he's like, what? And I turn it around and he's like, you've got to be kidding me.
Wow.
Because it's, I mean, if you think about it, that brand, it's known by everyone, whether you drink or you don't drink.
Of course.
You know that
it's like
particular.
Harley Davidson.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there are places in the world that people don't know what Harley Davidson is, but there's nowhere that people don't know who Jack Daniel is.
That's right.
And so I think that this idea that my ancestors, that Keith's ancestors, were somewhere at the beginning of this
iconic brand.
It would be the first time that we would. I mean, we know that Lucille, that it's said that Lucille's biscuit recipe was stolen and that became Bisquick. You know, like there were different things that have happened over time where people say this was created because it was stolen from this.
Right.
But it's never been able to be proven, and there's never been anything more than oral history. In this case, you actually had the company coming forward and saying, we understand that up until this point, we have said that it was a white preacher and distiller who taught a young Jack Daniel, but in fact, it was more likely his slave. That was the story.
Wow.
And so we're reading this, and it's the very first time a company had been the one to come forward and go, listen, we don't know all the facts.
Right.
We don't know the whole story, but this piece of it, we're pretty sure about.
Wow.
But here was the thing about the story is that it was still based on oral history,
Sure.
right? The only way it was going to be proven and put in the history books is somebody else was going to have to do that work. The New York Times had done their part.
Right.
Clay Risen, the journalist, basically wrote the story to lob it up for somebody else to take the ball and finish the play.
And so you,
I did.
In Singapore,
I did.
Decide
I did.
For my 40th birthday,
I'm gonna just,
I want to go find out what's going on over here.
Yeah, I've always been a big researcher. I've always loved history. And so Keith calls it my rabbit hole. Both Keith and I, we observe the Sabbath every single Sunday. And before it was on Saturdays, now we do it on Sundays. Doesn't matter, but one day a week, we always shut everything down for 24 hours every week. And in that 24 hours, I would go into my rabbit hole, which is just random research, and I would learn a topic inside and out for no reason at all.
Wow.
Other than I love to learn, I love to research. And so when I decided I wanted to dive in this, Keith looked at it as, well, here goes her rabbit hole. But instead of it being for one day that I was in my rabbit hole, I had decided I wanted to go for my birthday. So it was going to be a trip, and it was going to be several days. And Keith's only thing was, we will not stay longer than 4 days. Not staying longer than 4 days. That's it. And so he said, and at the time I was like, babe, I mean, if this is true, this is an incredible story, right? If it is true, and it could be a great movie,
right? If
it is true. Because if you look at the photo, you've seen the photo, right?
Yeah.
If you look at the photo, you've got Jack. The whole entire photo, for the most part, is all white men. Everyone around Jack is white. But if you look at the photo and the positioning of it, Jack Daniel is off center. It was the black man that was in the center. So the question was, what would cause the most famous whiskey maker in the world to cede the center position of his team photo to a black man?
Right.
That would have been controversial. I mean, come on. This is literally 1904. About then is when we've narrowed this down to. So this is in the first decade of the 20th century.
Right.
And a black man is in the center of the photo. Jack was making a statement.
Yeah.
The question was, what was the statement?
Right.
And that's what fascinated me. That was what fascinated me.
Fun. So then what? You come home and you book a trip to
Lynchburg, Tennessee.
Lynchburg, Tennessee.
Lynchburg, Tennessee.
And for 4 days?
For 4 days. Yeah, for 4 days. No, he wasn't playing about that.
Okay.
And his whole thing was, even if it is a book, you're not going back.
Right.
You will do all the research you can in those 4 days.
And then get to
and
LA.
Come write the book from LA.
Perfect.
We're not going back, and you're not going by yourself.
Right.
That was his thing. And so I was like, okay, fine, no problem.
Right. But I don't blame him.
Oh, I don't.
Right.
Are you kidding me?
I would be a little freaked out too.
Well, I wasn't bothered at all, but I understood why he was.
Right.
Yeah.
I understood. So then you come to Tennessee and you're here, and then you walk into
a library,
and you get some support from the librarian.
Yes, the assistant librarian was trying to help us, because once I told her what we were looking for, she had read the New York Times article as well, and she said, "Oh my God, I posted that on Facebook," and as a young gal, and she was trying to help, and there was literally nothing in the library that could help. There was nothing about Nearest or his family. The only thing that was there was Jack Daniel's legacy, his biography, which I had already read before coming down to Lynchburg. It's really what drew me to the story enough to say, I want to go to Lynchburg. It wasn't the article that did that. It was me then reading his biography and me saying, this is a biography written in 1967 at the height of the civil rights era by a white reporter from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who comes to Lynchburg, Tennessee to write the authoritative biography of the most famous whiskey maker of all time. And he includes this black man and this black man's sons over and over and over again, more times than the subject's own parents.
Wow.
There was...
In a favorable way.
In a very favorable way. There were times where everyone in Lynchburg at that time referred to Jack Daniels Uncle Jack. And so the book is written about and dedicated to Uncle Jack. But there are times when the author speaks of Uncle Nearest in a higher elevation than he does Jack.
Interesting.
But the book's about Jack.
Wow.
And so when I'm reading this, I'm looking at this and going, okay, this is an enslaved man that could not read or write.
Yep.
And you are holding him in this high esteem. Mm-hmm. Why? Mm-hmm. That was what drew me to Lynchburg. The New York Times article drew me to the biography.
Wow.
The biography is what drew me to Lynchburg.
And so when you got here and you started talking to Uncle Nearest family members, mm-hmm. and I think you said you talked to almost 100 of them, what did you end up finding out? What was your big takeaway? I mean, you go back mm-hmm. to this statement that there was this love between mm-hmm. them, right?
Yeah, well, my big takeaway was, number one, they knew very, very little, other than they had all been told that Nearest taught Jack how to make whiskey. But none of them knew that Nearest was Jack's first master distiller. Mm. I learned that from Jack's family. Mm. They didn't know that the property where Nearest Green was the master distiller was distillery number 7, and Nearest Green is the only known master distiller of distillery number 7. That was new news to them. There's a lot, they did not realize that Nearest Green was the wealthiest African American immediately following the Civil War in this area. They did not realize that Nearest's children and grandchildren were elite society. They'd walk around Lynchburg and be given the same level of respect as Jack's family.
Wow.
They did not know that. What they knew is generations later, because you have to remember Prohibition in sure. Tennessee began 10 years before it did federally.
Wow.
And it came out of Prohibition last in county by county.
Wow.
So Jack Daniel Distillery was closed for almost 40 years. So there was a big gap between the family that worked for Jack during, so Nearest and then Nearest's boys and Nearest's grandsons.
Wow.
40-year gap. Then the other, and so it was this side of the family that they were piecing, they had heard rumblings of the story, but you're not talking about something that went consistently through, right? You have an entire 2 generations in which whiskey was not being made in Lynchburg.
Right. So that is wild to think about. So 40 years, I didn't realize. Mm-hmm. So they basically put everything on ice. All the Jack Daniels manufacturing, everything was just put into shut down.
So in 1910, I had no idea. Prohibition began in 1920. But in 1910, it began in Tennessee. And so Jack's nephew, who at that point owned the distillery, moved the distillery to St. Louis.
Wow.
And for 10 years it operated in St. Louis until federal prohibition happened. And so you're literally talking about a 40-year gap in which none of Nearest's family was involved in Tennessee in the whiskey business.
So how did you find this property? What happened? Because this is the same. And by the way, all of the artifacts that you have are, I mean, goose skin. Yeah. Right? As I was looking at each and every one of, including that big, what is the cement?
The millstone.
The millstone.
So that is how they would have, that's how they ground that's how they milled the grain for the whiskey. And so that particular millstone would have been the millstone that was used at distillery number 7. So we transported that from the original property, which we own as well, in Lynchburg. But this property, what I would do when we bought the original property, I basically began doing my research out of that farm.
And so this is now on your day, what, 1, 2, 3, or 4?
So day 1, I learned from Jack's eldest descendant that the farm where Jack grew up, that all of the things that I had read about in the biography, where most of that biography took place, was a place called the Dan Call Farm. And day one, we hadn't even been there but for a few hours. And she said, you know, that farm that's in the book that brought you here, it's for sale.
Holy smokes.
And so...
And is Keith saying, do not go look at it? Or
oh,
is he
let me tell you, if there's anything my husband loves, it's real estate.
Okay.
So the moment she said a farm, he's like, I'm in. Like, you know, he was very reluctant to come, but the moment there's a farm involved, he was like, what's at the farm? And it's a 313 acre property in which the home where Jack grew up was still standing. The stones from the original still house where nearest green was the distiller, they were all still there on the property. And we went the very next day, taken by her cousin. So you've got Jack Daniel's family that from the moment we hit the town, were like, let us help you.
Wow. Yeah. So you tour the farm. That's for sale, by the way.
That had been for sale for 15 months. Talk about destiny.
Wow. With the artifacts that are over now in the retail store, but those came from the other.
They came from the other.
So you're touring this. Did you guys go back to your hotel that night and have a chit chat, or was this in the car that you said we have to own this?
Oh, we weren't through the doors of the house for even but maybe a couple minutes, and I look at Keith and I give him this look, and I was like, and he's like, he knew, like it was,
right.
And he was like, and that was just him reminding me, let's not negotiate against ourselves.
Right.
Show no excitement whatsoever. I mean, we had purchased enough properties to know,
sure.
You just kind of go through, you keep a very straight face, whether or not,
sure.
But we knew within minutes.
Oh
It was American history.
Wow.
We didn't have to know what we were going to do with it. All we had to know was it was a piece of American history.
And so at that point, where from the time in which you said, yes, we're going to make an offer, to I'm going to write this book out of that location. So the LA writing the book went out the window.
It went out the window. Because at that point, now we have this historic farm we have to restore.
Right.
Well, my husband's a big executive over at Sony Pictures. He can't do it.
Right.
So that left me.
Right.
But we were, I think within 2 days of being in Lynchburg, it felt incredibly safe. The people were really warm. They wanted the story of Nearest Green to be told. They all knew it their whole lives, whether white or black. They all wanted the story to be told. If you go to Lynchburg right now, they all celebrate that the story is finally being told.
I bet.
And so once that happened, Keith felt sufficiently, he felt comfortable that I was going to be safe. And so it was decided that I would be the one to oversee the restoration of the farm.
Amazing.
And if I was going to restore the farm, I might as well also write the book from there. Which
and
meant
what year was this?
2016.
2016. So at this point, you have no plans per se to start a distillery. I mean,
oh no,
you have no idea.
No, I mean a distillery, absolutely not.
Were you thinking more like a museum?
Yeah.
Were you like,
no? You know, at that point there wasn't. It was my life. I really have followed where the path has taken me.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not necessarily the path of least resistance, but it is the path that seems to naturally open.
Right.
And those paths that naturally open, I will fully explore those.
Sure.
And so this was a path that it was very clear that it was opening. I just didn't know where it was going to lead.
Sure.
I just made the decision to follow it and to see.
And so when you thought, I'm going to write this book, maybe it becomes a movie, and you recognized, I'm sure, because I've heard you talk about how big of a consolidated business the distillery business is.
Oh, yeah.
And how
spirits in general,
yeah. Right? And so if you were to look at the path of least resistance, for example, there are probably 50 other businesses you could probably come up with that are easier and faster to get to market than this one.
And at 50, try 1,000. I mean, there's a reason why there's never been a woman or a person of color to succeed in the American whiskey business.
Right.
And so I wasn't confused at all what I was about to get into.
Sure.
I was setting out to do something that had not been done before.
Right.
there's absolutely no way that is going to be easy.
Right.
So I had no expectation of ease in any way, shape, or form.
But the good news is you love the product to begin with. Like you were a whiskey drinker.
That was my drink of choice.
Right.
Before.
So you had a taste for it.
Yes.
And you knew a great whiskey and you knew what you were seeking. So at what point did you say, okay, I'm going to go raise capital and I'm going to go present myself to investors and talk about how I'm going to start the first. Yeah. Like multiple firsts.
Yeah.
How was that?
I will say this, it had to happen pretty quickly, because once these things began falling in place, we have to remember, it's still Jack Daniel's backyard.
Sure.
Right? And at the time, I don't remember what the market cap was for them, maybe low 20 billions, right? And so in my head, I kept seeing Spotlight, the movie,
of course,
in terms of how they were going to respond, right?
Sure.
And so I had to move so quick. If I was going to do anything, it was going to have to be at a pace so quickly, in order to be able to make sure that we had the best chance possible, for it to succeed.
Right.
But I had to be really, really honest with those initial investors that we went to. Like, this could fail. And I think that every investor knows there's a possibility of failure, but this had really unique challenges, and that if Brown-Forman, if Jack Daniels decided we are going to fight this, it was going to be very costly to fight. Now, I was absolutely certain I would win the fight.
Sure.
What I wasn't certain of is how much capital I would be left with after the fight.
Sure.
And so I really had to be comfortable in going to people to ask to invest. So that meant I could only go to the people who I knew could actually afford to lose it.
Sure. And did you go out on the road yourself and go pitch investors? Or
it was all friends and family.
All friends and family.
All friends and family. The first $3 million was all friends and family.
And what was your litmus test for, this is another green light, I should keep going?
if people said yes.
And then once you got the money, was there a slow build? Because
no slow build. No. There was never a slow build, because again, we were working a bit against the clock. Because we had a certain amount of time to be able to launch this into the market, without being blown up.
Right.
Because what I wasn't going to do, because I really do lead from a place of love, from a place of honor, from a place of respect. I did truly believe that was the relationship that Nearest and Jack had. So there was zero chance I was going to take this to market without first showing their company.
Right.
Zero chance.
Right.
And so that meant that from the moment I showed their company, I had to be ready to go immediately. Because if their response was, oh, we're going to blow this up, then I had to make sure it was the loudest damn boom anybody ever heard in this industry.
Right.
Because it was the first time that we were going to be actually commemorating an African American.
Wow, fun.
African Americans have been involved in the whiskey business day one in this country. It's our native spirit, and never once had there ever been a bottle of whiskey that wasn't named after a white male.
Right.
So if we were going to do this, I knew that it had great significance.
Yes.
And so, I just put it in my mind that nothing was going to stop us. But I will say we moved at a pace that was very quick and very stealthy, because I had to be the one to say, this is what we're going to be doing. I did not want it to... I needed to control when the attacks would begin.
Of course. And so do you live now with peace? I mean, you, at some point in a business trajectory, especially if you're outrunning larger competitors, there is a paranoid kind of looking over your shoulder at all times.
I don't do that. I don't have time for that.
No.
I don't have time for that. But here's the thing, is if I'm looking at you, I'm not looking at me.
Right.
What I'm supposed to do. I'm a huge, huge, huge San Antonio Spurs fan, and my favorite coach in the world is Coach Popovich. And there are players that have come to play for the Spurs veterans that have come from other teams. And one of the things they talk about is the scouting reports that Pop gives out. In other places where you'll go play a player, the scouting report will be like 40 pages long, where it shows you this is what this player does. This is how this player moves. This is this player's vulnerabilities. There's all these, I mean, like step by step, it'll tell you every piece of. You go to the Spurs, the scouting report is like a page or 2 pages long. And I've listened to players who have gone and said, it's the craziest thing you'll ever see. But Popovich's whole thing is if we are doing our best, it doesn't matter what they're doing. You don't need to know exactly how that player plays, because if you're doing your best and you're focused on giving your best game, that's all that matters.
Right.
And so I actually have a bit of blinders on when it comes to the industry. So much of what I do, I pay no attention to what the others are doing.
Interesting.
And so we don't follow, like there's nothing about what we have done that has followed anyone that has gone before us.
Interesting.
I don't pay attention to it.
Right. And the product itself is what carries the benefit, right? The consumer tries it and tastes it, and that speaks for itself. And then the story is what, through grassroots marketing, is probably the hardest part to convey, right? But you've done an incredible job.
Yeah, every aspect of it. You have the story, you have the leadership, you have, I mean, our sales team is phenomenal. You have all these different aspects of it, but we really are writing our playbook as we go. So yes, others will study this.
Yeah.
They already are. I mean, we see so many things that we've done that others are already starting to do, and we look at it and go, that's not going to work because you don't have all the pieces.
Right.
You took a piece of what we did. That doesn't work. You need all the pieces to actually make that work. So we are seeing people look at us and then try to emulate different things that we do. Right. But we don't look at anybody else.
And do you believe in the last 4 or 5 years now, it's been 5 years, and I mean award after award, you really have, you literally like swept the Academy Awards or equivalent
basically
of, right?
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, I first saw your story maybe 3 years ago on this United flight, which I, by the way, never watch anything on TV because I think I have too much work to do. And I was captivated with your story. And I remember thinking, whoa, I want to meet this woman. But what would you say, like, if you could hindsight the last 5 years, what was your biggest aha or surprise? Was there anything that you thought, gosh, I did not anticipate this. This is a 180 degree away from what I thought I would deal with? Or
I would say my big aha, people always assume that if an industry doesn't have women, if an industry doesn't have people of color, that it is intentional, that they are being blocked from coming in. And I'd say my biggest aha was people weren't blocking us from coming into this industry. I just happened to come in like a wrecking ball. Right? And said, this is what we're doing. We belong here. And I got no resistance, right? So coming in, they were absolutely not used to women being the ones calling them and saying, we need this, or women showing up at meetings. But being used to it and blocking it are two different things.
Right.
And I think that for a lot of women, a lot of people of color, they assume that the reason why we're not somewhere is we're being blocked. And I was pleasantly surprised that people actually welcomed us in. Now keep in mind, my style is such where people are like, who the hell does she think she is? Because I always walk into a room like I belong in that room, because I believe if I'm in a room, I belong to be in that room. And so for some people, especially insecure people, where there's a lot of insecure men, there's sort of this, well, who does she think she is? But then there's this appreciation once they've been in the room with me for any period of time. Oh, she knows exactly who she is. And so what's been really nice is being in this industry and seeing how welcoming this industry is. So even though we weren't here before, now that we're here, they're like, are there more of you?
Wow.
And I think that has been, and so now they're really trying to figure out, well, how do we get more of you?
And how has it been being in Jack Daniel's backyard? Aren't you, how many miles apart are you?
So my team right now is doing a tour at Jack Daniel's, because their team was here doing a tour a few weeks ago. And my team, so many of them had never been over there. So they're literally there right now. I mean, that's Jack Daniel country, Lynchburg, Tennessee. We're right next door in Shelbyville, and we are building this as Nearest Green country.
Wow.
And I think it's a beautiful thing. Together, they work side by side in life. And now the two cities are side by side. And it's funny because my house is literally in between the two. Like, you can't get to Jack Daniel without passing the gates of my house. And it's 15 minutes going one way. And then this distillery is 15 minutes. So I'm literally smack dab in between Jack and Nearest. And there's a metaphor there. And I love that we are able to bring the two together. I mean, both legacies very clearly live on their own.
Sure.
We built them to live on their own. But I love that even in living on their own, they still are being embraced together.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you were gifted this connection to bridge them into us.
Love.
Right?
Love bridges everything.
Don't you feel that?
It does. It does. I think that when people, they always kind of look at this, and it's one of the reasons why, whether it's our social media or our press, I was always the one, still am, to write the press releases, to nothing goes on social media that I've not approved ahead of time, because I realize I'm in a very unique position of being able to see both sides. That's really unusual.
It is.
I can see those who love Jack and why they love Jack, and those that would be resistant to the story of Nearest, why that would be the case. And I can embrace understanding why that is, right? And again, I don't believe in group thought. I don't need them to agree with me. I don't.
Right.
But being able to show that love and respect on behalf of Nearest and on behalf of Jack.
And what do you think, if you could fast forward, because one of the things that I've learned in researching even owning a distillery is when they say a 7-year, a 10-year, a 15-year, a 30-year, like that's not a joke.
It's expensive in hell to do this.
That's not a joke.
There isn't a no.
I thought it was maybe like we accelerate the aging by putting it in this special thing.
No, and it's the youngest age. So like in rum, if you put a little bit of 30-year-old in, you can call it 30-year-old.
Interesting.
In whiskey, if you put a little bit of, say if you have a 10-year-old, but you put a little bit of 4-year-old in it, you got to call it 4-year-old.
Wow.
And so that age statement is the youngest of what is in the bottle.
Wow. So in terms of imagining yourself, because I can only imagine that what you've built maybe 7 years ago, you could not have even imagined being where you are today.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the trajectory of owning this massive global brand. And
if we were going to do it, we were going to do it. Remember, I told you, excellence is the baseline.
Right.
And so coming out of the gate, my team knew we're going for being one of the biggest in the world.
It is incredible.
That's what we're going for, because we're not going to half-ass this.
Yeah.
Like, why would we come out and want to be small?
Right. Right.
Like, if we're going to go after it, we're going after this.
Yeah.
And we're going to work and fight like hell to get to here. Otherwise, it's not worth any of our collective efforts.
Sure.
And so, yeah.
And where, if you could imagine fast forwarding 20 years from now, do you think about what that looks like? Can you imagine what it would be?
I look about 100 years out.
100
because
years.
I feel like this brand is 150, 160 years behind the other brands that it should be alongside.
Sure.
But for slavery.
Right.
Right. And so I look at it, and I look at Johnny Walker, Jim Beam, and Jack Daniel until now have been essentially the Mount Rushmore. And we're carving Nearest Green as that fourth person. Wow. That's what we're doing. So when I'm looking at 100 years from now, Nearest Green is firmly carved into the Mount Rushmore of whiskey. That's what we're doing. And we are every day chiseling away at it.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
And so if you were guiding your younger self or giving advice to other women entrepreneurs who are about to tackle, like in many ways, a brand new category. Like if you think about it, the Sarah Blakeleys of the world who start Spanx, you know, many people said this is a big business over here and it's not tappable, so go find something else to go do. If you were to give someone advice who's about to tackle or has a passion to tackle,
you know, I think we don't usually know until someone goes in it and then they find out. Like, I didn't know that about the whiskey business till I was in it.
Sure.
That, you know, and so I'm sure there's a lot of industries, because you have to remember, women have been second-class citizens since the beginning, since the founding of this country.
That's right.
Right? And so were African Americans.
Yeah.
And so I think that we're going to continue to make history, because we're just now getting to a place where we're no longer second-hand citizens.
That's right.
And so I think I posted on social media not long ago, because one of the things that people are always blown away when I walk into a room or they hear me talk is they talk about this enormous confidence that I have, and it surprises people. And so I shared with folks, because I don't have this imposter syndrome thing that people keep talking about. I'm like, I don't even understand it. Why are y'all even naming it? Like, it bothers me that people are actually giving space and naming it something that they have to go to therapy for, when really it just says you are in a room that God has blessed you to be in and has determined that you belong in that room, but you're second guessing your own skills, you're second guessing your own, because you're like, well, all these other people have been here longer than me, or they're more successful than me. I was literally at this founders forum with Jamie Dimon and all of the JP Morgan leadership a week ago in New York. 125 founders. And I mean, you're talking about 110 billion in revenue annually from those 125 founders. That gives you an idea of who was in the room. I mean, you literally have the founder of Home Depot, who's old as hell. And it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, wow, you're still alive. And, but I mean, these are the kind of folks that were in the room, the founder of Peloton and the founder of Clear. And you look at this, and I walk into that room, and all these people, their companies, for the most part, much bigger than mine.
Sure.
I have the exact same amount of confidence, if not more, than every single person that is in that room. And it's because God put me in that room. I didn't. I didn't elbow to get in. I understand I'm in the room because I'm supposed to be in the room. And so what I shared, because I kept hearing this imposter syndrome thing and it was driving me crazy, because I kind of understood what it was. Most of us that advance in life end up being placed in rooms before we really are qualified to be there. But who cares whether or not you're qualified to be? You're in the room. That means you're supposed to be there.
Right.
Learn what you need to learn, make the relationships you need to, but own the fact that you're in the room because you're supposed to be there.
That's right.
And so I posted on social that I live at the intersection of enormous confidence and humility.
Yeah.
I live at this intersection because my confidence comes from knowing I didn't create myself.
Right.
And it's whoever created me that puts me in that room.
Right.
And so the humility is I didn't create myself.
Right.
And so I'm in this room because
I was blessed.
I was blessed to be in this room.
Right.
But my confidence comes from the fact that my creator believed enough in me to put me in that room.
Right.
And so I would be doing a disservice to my creator.
Yes.
To not show up 100% as if I belong in that room.
Goose skin. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's really incredible. I love watching you on the TV show that I saw, but I mean, meeting you in person has been just that much better and more amazing. And I'm so excited to continue to watch you soar and excel and on the cover of every major magazine.
Yeah.
And continuing to be in these incredible rooms telling your story and the story of Uncle Nearest and the love between these two men who at a time nobody thought could or should or would have this love for one another.
I have the greatest job in the world.
You
I
really
literally,
do.
in the middle of everyone talking about the divisions between black and white and this, and politics and all the rest of that stuff, I get to walk out in the center of all of that and say, but love.
Yeah.
But love.
Right. And you're the steward of that relationship and bringing it to the world. And by the way, that bourbon house and that area of aging barrels sure smells delicious.
It smells like baking bread, right?
Oh my God.
I love it's the yeast. I love walking through there and I'm like, it's freshly baked bread.
It is just like feeling like home.
It is.
So thank you so much for allowing me the privilege to be here, to feel the feeling of what it feels like to be in this space. And I mean, what you've built is absolutely remarkable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to From Potential to Powerhouse, Success Secrets from Female Leaders with your host, Tracy Holland. We invite you to tune in every week. Subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, please leave a rating and review it and share it with your friends. Visit our website and follow us on social media using the links in the show notes. Until next time, high five. You've got this.